What happened in September last year?
He was very drunk, and he pushed me around.
This is a divorce court. It's the end of the line for 900,000 Americans a year. A line that begins in courtship and ends in the courthouse. For every 4 marriage services performed in the United States, there is one divorce decree granted.
He came by the house, and he took 2 of our children and left with them.
What did he say to you about it?
He said that he would never bring the children back. And I didn't see them or know where they were for 1 month.
No one will deny that these figures are deeply disturbing. In this broadcast, we shall explore why there is so much divorce in the United States, who suffers most, and what might be done to help those whose marriages are in trouble. We shall report on the confusion created by our having as many divorce laws as there are states in the Union. We shall see the lengths to which people go to get around the law, faking evidence, telling lies, traveling thousands of miles to buy their way out of marriages. We shall show how people hurt those they should protect most, the children. There's sharp disagreement among experts as to what ought to be done about our divorce dilemma. Lawyers and judges do agree that there's a great deal wrong with the values we bring to divorce and to marriage, American style.
The law of divorce ought to begin at the other end and take a look at the eligibility for matrimony. In the state of New York, any 2 persons who have arrived at legal age can be married by merely demonstrating that they don't have communicable syphilis.
At times, I think most people think less of the marriage contract than a contract to buy a television set.
Yes, a great many of them tend to look to the sexual pleasures and consider that that's all that marriage is for, just licensed fornication.
It's something that should last a lifetime. They figure, well, if we can't get along, we'll just go get a divorce.
The San Francisco lawyer Jake Ehrlich once wrote that divorce and embalming are 2 processes that should never be resorted to prematurely.
International Business Machines, IBM presents CBS Reports, The Divorce Dilemma. Now, here is CBS News correspondent Walter Cronkite.
Today, the United States has the highest divorce rate in the world, 6 times that of our northern neighbor, Canada, for example. We take marriage for granted, sort of a permanent honeymoon. The words that come to mind are happily ever after and until death, not divorce, do us part. In a way, our laws reflect this. Marriage is simple and cheap. Divorce is complicated and expensive. How you get divorced depends on where you live. Unlike many countries, we have no overall federal law relating to divorce. Each of the 50 states has its own set of rules, and the confusion that exists is shown by the different number of grounds in the various states. 14 grounds for divorce in these states, 13 grounds in these states, 12 grounds, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, and 1 ground for divorce in this state, New York. What are these grounds? They range from adultery, which accounts for only 2% of all U.S. divorces, through this melancholy catalog. Unchastity, impotence, desertion, non-support, mental cruelty, physical cruelty, drunkenness, fraud, bigamy, living apart, drug addiction, incompatibility, insanity.
Separation, what happens?
But when you listen to people whose marriages are in trouble, when you hear them pour out their hearts to court investigators in places like Detroit and Toledo, the things they talk about have little to do with law.
The 4 children you were born are the sole issues of the marriage. Is that right, ma'am?
That's right.
They are human and painful.
What is your position, sir, on your wife's motion for this temporary relief and, of course, her filing for this divorce?
I don't want no divorce. I don't want any divorce.
Why have you filed this action for divorce? What are your reasons for filing?
Because I just can't go on living with him.
What are your reasons? Why can't you live with this man?
I don't like him. I don't love him. They're just...
You lived with him for 11 years, and you've had 4 children by this man.
That's right.
What's happened to the feeling?
Well, feeling hasn't been there for quite a while, and I'm just tired of trying. I don't want to live with him. I don't want him under the same roof with me.
How is it you lost this feeling, this interest in your husband?
It just happened gradually over the years. Now I'm not even sure I loved him when I married him.
She seemed to be more happy at work or working than she was while she was at home.
I ask a question, and instead of getting a polite or a civil answer, I get a kind of a snotty answer, and I don't like it.
The real issue is that my wife is selfish. She's looking out for herself.
Well, he began to stay out late, and he started running around, and, it just really made me a nervous wreck, and I was trying to work and babysit, too, and I just couldn't do both of them.
It's completely finished. No more. I've had it.
What emerges in preliminary steps for divorce has to do with people, with relationships, deep and complex. It is very difficult to assess the true situation, as any expert would tell you. Toledo Family Court Judge Paul Alexander.
All they see are the surface manifestations. He came home drunk and beat me up. That's a very common assertion. Why did he drink, and why did he come home and beat her? They don't inquire into that.
Detroit Judge Victor Baum.
They've gathered their ideas largely from the mass media, which romanticize and glamorize marriages. I think a good many Americans expect too much from marriage as a result. And I think a good many are prepared to give too little. I have yet to see the case where one of the spouses is entirely at fault and the other is angelic and entirely without fault. Usually both have contributed to the marital discord and the problem and the divorce.
Monsignor John C. Knott, Director of the National Catholic Welfare Conference Family Life Bureau.
People don't know how to love each other. Honestly, it's as simple and basic as that. They have no idea of how to love another person. They're completely wrapped up in themselves. We're all born self-centered, and I think part of our maturation process is to get out of ourselves and begin to think of another person, and begin to feel for another person, and begin to love. They just can't accept love, and they can't give it because it was never fed into them. It's not in the sexual adjustment. It's not in the money adjustment. It's not in the toothpaste adjustment or any of these adjustments. It's in the love adjustment.
Jerome Nathanson, a leader of the New York Society for Ethical Culture.
Beautiful girl, handsome man. Come together, big deal. First thing you know, she doesn't look so good in the morning. Or the next thing you know, he doesn't shave often enough. He shouts and this and that's not the person I married. Boom.
When the explosion of a marriage leads to divorce, the next stop may be Reno, Nevada, a place long associated with easy divorce. It's not uncommon to see women with children arriving at the Reno airport to be met by a lawyer who will handle the final steps of a divorce already settled by other lawyers at home, where divorce may not be so easy. Such matters as child custody and alimony have been worked out in advance. For the rich, alimony may be substantial and highly publicized. For the majority, there's often not enough money to go around. The woman may have to go back to work, and there may be financial hardship all around. Properly executed, Nevada divorces have been accepted in all of the 50 states. The meeting in the lawyer's office can be a poignant one. For even here, a child may not escape the harsh legalistic mechanics of divorce.
Have you been separated very long?
Yes, we have. Mm-hmm.
Approximately how long?
Just 3 years.
Do you recall
as of June.
June of this year? It would
yes,
have been 3
it would
years.
be 3 years in June.
Well, I think that would be advisable then, and we'll use the ground of 3 years separation.
Pardon?
Chris, would you like to draw some pictures on this while we're talking here?
Why don't you draw
There.
some pictures, honey?
All right, fine.
I didn't know you had 3-year separation.
Well,
I didn't know that
this
could be
is one of the legal grounds in Nevada, one of the 9 legal grounds, and it's very simple because the evidence required is only that you have lived separate and apart for 3 years continuously and without cohabitation in any way, shape, or form.
There is a fine point of irony in the fact that Reno, famous for divorces, also may lay claim to the title of marriage mill. No blood tests are required. There's no waiting period. Those getting divorced, however, must live in Nevada for 6 weeks and subscribe to the polite and sometimes unspoken fiction of intending to continue residence indefinitely. Nevada Governor Grant Sawyer points out to reporter Warren Wallace how important that one word indefinitely can be.
Indefinitely is the key word, and of course the way out of this, when people decide to move, whether it be almost immediately after the divorce procedure or a day or two or week or month, is that they've changed their mind.
That amounts to fraud, doesn't it?
It doesn't. As a matter of fact, it depends on whether or not the person was telling the truth at the time they testified. Now, I'm sitting here at this desk. It's my intention to stay in the office all day. But I may not. I may change my mind. Something may come up and I may leave. Now, I know this is begging the question. But the fact of the matter is this is the legal approach to the matter of domicile and indefinite period after the divorce process is over.
What do lawyers say about the effect of this on legal standards? Jason Burke of New York.
All of the sister states, and by and large, people who go and procure divorces there are engaging in perjury in that they are expressing an intention which is not a real intention. That is of actually residing permanently or at least indefinitely in that sister state.
Professor Henry Foster of New York University Law School, considered by many to be the leading expert on divorce in this country.
The migratory divorce situation in America is repugnant to me primarily because the court, which is not at the home of the parties, which is a foreign court, does not have the facilities to treat with the problems of any children. It's not concerned with them, really. A divorce mill is a very mechanical thing.
To ease the hard realities of mechanical divorce for migrant divorcees and their children, there are places like the Donner Trail Ranch just outside Reno. It takes money. If you want 6 weeks of easy living, plus a bit of sightseeing and a sampling of local entertainment, it would be well to have at least $2,000 to pay the tab. Legal fees and airplane tickets run about another $1,000. Still, the living is agreeable. Plenty to do. Pleasant company. A cozy place to nurse one's wounds. There is the question as to whether it is altogether healthy to be surrounded by companions in marital crack-up. Whether the conversation might not tend to be depressing and morbid.
You know, I think they do find help in talking to each other. Because people talk much more easily to each other here than I think they do in most places. You wouldn't usually sit down to somebody you just met and tell them what, horrible things happened to you. But here people do that, which I think is, good. But I think it also, you can carry it too far, that some people tend to get into a terrible rut, and they spend the entire 6 weeks doing nothing but talking about what horrible people their husbands are or how miserable they are. And if they do that, that's no good either.
Have you thought a lot about the past?
Constantly.
Come to any new conclusions about yourself?
Yes, I have. I've decided after 24 years that certainly having been so very, very close to one single man and feeling that I had been quite let down, that I have learned through these weeks that there is a future.
Well, now, you're a man, and there aren't many men here. Did that bother you, being in a minority?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, it was a very new experience and a pleasurable experience.
Nothing to do but wait, chat, think, or perhaps try not to think. Money, the waiting may be easy enough. But if you don't have money, it will be necessary to earn your way. Quite a few must go to work because they came for divorce without even knowing there is a waiting period.
How did you manage to come here without realizing you had to live here? I mean, didn't anybody tell you had to live for a certain period of time?
The movie stars gave me the idea, you know. I said, well, they always go to, you know, to get a divorce. I said, why can't I? So that's the reason I came over here.
What sort of work do you do?
I'm a shill girl.
What's a shill girl?
Well, they work at the crap table and 21.
Doing what?
Dealing out, something about the cards that you have to make 21. And the crap table, all you do is shoot the dice.
This woman works in a hospital, night shift.
How do you spend your time here?
Well, so far we just work and babysit in shifts. And the only time we have together, we take the children to the park or something during the day. Our night hours are all filled up from 4 o'clock until 10:30 in the morning.
The hard realities of divorce are particularly hard for women with children who have to work to pay their way. It is difficult for the woman, and it is difficult for the child. More about this in a moment. When serious trouble develops in a marriage, it seems the children are bound to suffer, no matter what steps are taken. In material terms, we spent $1.7 billion last year in the United States for aid to dependent children. Most of these children were products of broken homes. And in human terms, the cost of marital breakup is even more staggering. Monsignor Knott.
We have, for example, about 10 to 12 million children now living in one-parent families and being brought up many times in neurotic circumstances. They don't have the right physical environment, the right emotional environment, and these are where our dropouts are coming from. These are where our illegitimacies are coming from. This is where our mental health problems in 10 years are coming from. And 500,000 children are being added each year to this whole tremendous other world of childhood.
For the sake of the children, should marriages be held together at any cost? The answer is not a simple one. Some say that the price may be too high, greater damage to the family, and particularly to the children themselves. Morris Ploskow, a former judge, describes the harm an unhappy marriage can do to children.
I have seen cases, and any divorce lawyer has seen cases, where considerable damage has been done to children by virtue of the fact that the parties have stayed married or fought over the years while the children were growing up. I think that children can adjust themselves to a frank break where the parties are not getting along temperamentally than in situations where they attempt to cover up the differences, but the children are fully aware of what's been going on.
A leading expert in this field, child psychiatrist and author of the book, Children of Divorce, Dr. J. Louise Despair.
For many years preceding the legal divorce, there may have been such tension, such hostility, rampant, exploding, that the child cannot help but be permeated with it and threatened by it. And the child may react in a way which is almost a thank you, because at least the battles are over for him.
Dr. Despair speaks of another divorce problem, the mother with custody of the children, the father's rights to visit the children.
When the child is repeatedly prevented from seeing his father, for one reason or another, the child, even if he's very young, sees through the motivation. He understands, it's very transparent to him that every time he's supposed to go at 3 o'clock with his father, something happens that he has no control over, of course. Maybe he's not feeling well, or he has a dancing lesson, or whatnot. And he will not put it this way, that my mother is hostile to my father. He doesn't put it that way, that he senses that the mother is instrumental in preventing seeing the father. There are also silences which are very eloquent. Whenever the father is mentioned or the child comes back from seeing the father and is bubbling over something that has happened, a hostile expression and a silence are telling volumes to this child.
Toledo Family Court referee Nellie Matt.
Sometimes they can really be vicious about it. And you say, do you love your child? Why, of course I love my child. I wouldn't do a thing in the world to harm the child. But you can't get them to see where this hatred in themselves that they're transferring to the child is hurting the child. Many times you can, but sometimes not. Sometimes not.
To protect the children, the family court in Milwaukee has introduced a revolutionary procedure. Circuit Judge Robert Hansen has added a new dimension which greatly enlarges the power of the court in family matters. It was upheld by a state Supreme Court decision which ruled that a child in a divorce action should be treated as an interested and affected person, not as a pawn, possession, or chattel. In divorce proceedings in Milwaukee, there are the usual lawyers representing the father and the mother. But, and here is the new dimension, there's also a court-appointed lawyer representing the children. He is not merely an advisor. His status is equal to that of the other two attorneys, and his arguments carry as much weight as theirs.
I do not believe that the father is worthy to be called a parent, considering all of the factors previous to the divorce, the factors that they've tried to bring out, and subsequently, since I've reinvestigated, it's my feeling that he's not worthy to be called a parent and that he's unfit to have custody.
Once the children are given a voice in court, their interests come into the foreground and are often the main point discussed. Judge Hansen describes the reaction parents have to the court stepping in this way.
Our experience has been that the common sense of providing for representation of the children so recommends itself to the parents that they don't resist, and they're almost relieved by the idea that there will be somebody in these proceedings to speak up for the children. And I think they see the common sense that the children are not to be a pawn in a contest or a prize awarded to the winner.
The important feature of this new court procedure in Milwaukee is the great additional power it gives to the bench. As we see in the courtroom of Judge Hansen's associate, Judge Leander Foley, Jr., all the activities of the court's Family Conciliation Department, psychiatrists, social workers, investigators, are brought into play to protect the child. Custody may even be taken from both parents, should such a step seem warranted.
Have you had an opportunity to discuss this case with the minor children of the parties?
Yes, I have.
And could you indicate to the court what the results of your interviews with these children are?
Well, I find the children to be, considering the circumstances, I think the younger three in particular have done fairly well. The older two children have shown some signs of problems. The oldest child in particular has had some difficulty with the law. The second oldest child is in essence a school dropout in that he's attending the vocational school one day a week and is working the rest of the time. I think that the oldest girl has almost assumed a quasi-mother position in this family, which is almost too much to expect of a 13-year-old child. At present, I think she's doing a fairly good job. But when we see these children reaching the dating age, then we see the problems usually cropping up. Our recommendation would be that physical custody be vested in the father, legal custody with the Department of Public Welfare.
Mrs. Shelley, may I ask you, has he been a good provider as far as the children are concerned?
Yes, this is one point in which both the children and the mother, as well as the father, agree. The children have always stated that no matter what they wanted, their father always provided for them. The mother also agreed, even in her highest points of conflict and turmoil with this man, has always stated that he has provided very well for them.
All right. You've heard the recommendation of Mrs. Shelley and the guardian ad litem for your children. Are you willing to accept and take over in the physical custody of these children now?
Well, whatever the courts decide, but I can handle my children. I mean, I can provide very well. I will not let them down.
Now listen, when we give the legal custody of these children to the Department of Public Welfare, we do that to help you, to assist you in the supervision of these children, the control of these children, to really supervise the conflict that's going on between your wife and yourself concerning these children. And this does not eliminate or destroy both your wife and your responsibility to emotionally support these children. Now that means that both of you must cooperate with one another in the duty and the right to love these children. When I talk about love, I'm not talking about giving them things. I'm talking about training them and motivating them and educating and disciplining these children. You must cooperate with one another in following the directions of the Department of Public Welfare, but you must also cooperate by presenting each other to the children with an attitude of respect, that you respect each other as the mother or the father of these children. You mustn't in any way prohibit the children from loving their mother. They want their mother to be somebody that they can emulate, they can follow. And if you start destroying her in any way, even though she is doing things that are wrong, you're going to hurt them emotionally. and the court is necessarily pleading with you to cooperate with the Department of Public Welfare, the Department of Domestic Conciliation, and your wife.
Your Honor, when I spoke with Mr. Barron in his office, I've learned a lot of things, or I didn't know things. I want the children to love her more.
Well, first of all, I think this man understands what this proceeding is, and he certainly has shown to the court in this interview a sincere interest in these children. I'm sure he's going to do a good job. The court will find, however, that in view of the conflict, that both the parents are not able to give adequate support to these children, and therefore transfer the legal custody to the Department of Public Welfare temporarily. Grant the physical custody to the father. We'll adjourn this matter for a few minutes and allow the lawyers to get together, and we'll go into the matter of what we're going to do on the question of the granting of the trial of the issue on the distribution of the estate.
There are other aspects of the divorce dilemma. Religion is one. When divorce law is under discussion, religious leaders often enter the arena with very strong arguments for or against a proposed piece of legislation. Today, the Protestant and Jewish faiths generally do not oppose liberalizing divorce laws. The Roman Catholic Church traditionally has been against any weakening of divorce statutes. Protestant minister Dr. James G. Emerson.
We would not make a distinction between a marriage that is in the church or outside of the church. Both are equally binding, and they are no different because of the place where they take, of the place where it's consecrated. But the difference would be that we would say that there is failure in the world, or there's sin in the world. We don't like them, we object to them. We think killing is wrong, but killing takes place. We think war is wrong, but war takes place. And unhappily, marriages do break down, and we have to recognize the reality of this.
Rabbi Mordecai Brill of the Synagogue Council of America.
Judaism feels that divorce is permissible, but has always frowned upon it, and the Jewish divorce rate has always been a low one, although I'm sorry to say that present indications on the American scene would tell us that the divorce rate among Jews is slowly coming up to the national average. Judaism, while it never thought of marriage as a sacrament, and we do not use the words in the Jewish marriage ceremony unto death do us part, recognizes that human beings being imperfect, that here and there can be an imperfect marriage, and when all efforts at reconciliation have failed, then a divorce is proper.
Reporter Wallace asks Monsignor John C. Knott, what is the attitude of the Catholic Church toward marriages that do not work?
Well, again, trying to help them as much as possible. If they do find themselves in a bind, as it were, caught in a dilemma, and the marriage obviously is dead, they would be allowed to separate, get a legal separation from the church courts, or allowed a legal separation from the state courts, or even in particular instances allowed a divorce. Always with the recognition, however, that the sacramental union, which can be only dissolved by the death of one partner, still binds them, even though they legally and civilly they are a divorced or separated pair. In the eyes of the church, they're still bound to one another because of the sacramental bond, and would not be permitted to remarry another person.
I have heard it charged that the Catholic Church is, as an institution, an obstacle to reform in divorce laws.
I think it would depend on what you mean by reform. They certainly would be opposed to weakening or making divorce easier or letting people dissolve their marriage almost by mutual consent without the protections that I indicated.
To my mind, this is in no proper sense a religious question.
Erwin N. Griswold, Dean, Harvard Law School, testifying before a New York legislative committee investigating the state's divorce law.
There are persons who are opposed to divorce on religious grounds, and I fully respect their views. But we have a clear separation of church and state in this country, and this has only recently been formally recognized and encouraged by the Catholic Church, as I understand the news from Rome. Under our law and constitutional system, one person's religion should not bind other people through the law.
I do not believe that the hierarchy of this church or that church
the bishopric of this church or that one, the ministry of the rabbinate of any group, has a right to tell me what I must do morally. I find that a presumption, and I find it, in fact, an outrage.
The problem of religion and the law comes to a focus in New York State, which for years has been a battleground for divorce law. This story in a moment. New York is not the only state to have a tough divorce law. So have New Jersey and Massachusetts, among others. The reason so much attention is focused on New York is that its law represents an extreme approach to the problem of trying to hold families together. There's only one ground allowed, and that is adultery. The law, Protestant in origin, has stayed unchanged since 1787, even though the New York Bar Association has been crusading for change for the past 50 years. Chief opposition in recent years has come from Roman Catholics, who make up 40% of the state's population. Currently, the state legislature is considering a bill which would admit 4 new grounds. One of them would grant a divorce if a couple lived apart for 2 years. During state legislative hearings, a Catholic spokesman opposed the living apart ground as divorce by consent. Currently, New York has the lowest divorce rate of all the states, 6 times less than the national average. But the statistics are misleading. They do not include the very high number of annulments or desertions, known as the poor man's divorce, nor do they take into account the number of New Yorkers who get their divorces out of state. For those couples who stay at home to get divorced, some 4,500 a year, there's only one way out, the charge of adultery. There's so much faking of evidence in regard to this that the word adultery is often put, ironically, in quotes. Attorney Vivian Gentleman, a specialist in divorce cases.
Despite the efforts of a very enlightened bar association, and despite the cooperation which we in this field try as ethical practitioners to give the bar, the blonde in the black pajamas is still with us, and the setup of the husband who is caught in bed with the blonde by his wife, who has, of course, been told when and where to appear.
It is all prearranged. There is no defense. They've arranged the whole affair, and we have to sit there and render judgments and issue decrees based upon a wholly fictitious set of facts.
The judge knows you're lying. You know you're lying. Your attorney knows you're lying. The opposite attorney knows you're lying. There's even a script in the state of New York so that you won't deviate and make any mistakes as in your fraudulent testimony.
Professor Robert Byrne of Fordham University Law School.
Well, I tell you that there isn't a collusive divorce that's been obtained that a lawyer has not been a party to the fraud. And I think it is incumbent upon the legal profession to attack the collusion, not the legislature to liberalize divorce and throwing up its hands in despair at the collusion.
Attorney Helen Buttenwieser describes the degrading steps necessary to prove adultery, even when it is not phony but actually exists.
Proof that adultery is committed in most cases requires an expensive and extremely unpleasant business of having detectives follow the person to get proof of adultery, or asking friends who are unwilling to do it to give you such testimony or get such testimony for you.
Why is it so expensive to prove?
Well, you have to have 2 witnesses to catch a person in the act of adultery or under circumstances which will permit of no other inference except adultery, which means that you have to have detectives follow a person from a known place to very often an unknown place.
Warren Wallace questioned a man whose profession it is to gain this difficult kind of evidence. Private investigator M.J. Basile.
How do you cope with this?
Well, if we can show that the person is actually visiting over a period of time a certain party other than his wife or her husband, this is sometimes used, or actually what the client does is go in with witnesses, several witnesses, and see what they can observe in the apartment or hotel, whatever it may be. A disheveled bed or clothing strewn around the place, etc.
What are the standard ways to get in?
Usually on some pretext is what they use, stating that there may be some leaky faucet or some message or some delivery of some type. Now, this is fine if they open the door and say, come right in. But if they don't, you have a problem where you're stepping across the law.
Do you ever feel sneaky?
No, not at all. I'm delving into a problem the same as a doctor who performs an operation. I don't think he feels sneaky if he's going into someone's gut to take out something cancerous.
You regard this as a kind of a necessary social surgery?
It sure is. That's exactly what it is.
If divorce is difficult to get, it becomes expensive to get. And the result is one law for the rich and one law for the poor. The inequities of this are most tellingly pointed up by the high number of migratory divorces obtained by New Yorkers. The fastest way to cut the knot for New Yorkers who can afford about $1,000 and who can agree to part is the Mexican divorce. Getting one takes only a little longer than it takes for a jet aircraft to fly to El Paso, Texas, and back. In July 1965, the highest court in New York State ruled to the effect that if two people can settle terms and one can make the trip, then a Mexican divorce is valid, the so-called Rosenstiel and Wood decisions. Had the court ruled otherwise, 250,000 New Yorkers would have found themselves in a terrible matrimonial tangle, for about that number already had taken this route. So it's the 9:30 plane to El Paso for Alan Niter of Brooklyn. In El Paso, you may be met by a representative of the Mexican lawyer who has been called in by your New York lawyer to handle the case. The essential rules are that both partners in the marriage must consent to the action being taken in Mexico, and that at least one partner appear before a judge. It is not necessary to stay in Mexico, nor is it necessary to pretend you're going to. It's a short drive across the border to Juarez. No questions are asked. In fact, on the official level, no English need be spoken. All that's really required is to sign, pay, and go back to New York. If you wanted to save on hotel room, you could do it all in a day. Alan Niter chose to stay in El Paso overnight.
Do you feel that you fully understand everything that happened to you?
I feel that I don't understand anything that happened down there at all. It was going through the motions that were expressed by the Mexican attorney.
It is unconscionable that New York should tolerate fraudulent annulment at home and accept cynical repudiations of marriage when made south of the border. It is incomprehensible that a state which has in the past been in the forefront of progress and reform in the administration of justice should permit its laws and procedures to be subverted so as to make a mockery out of moral pretensions. New York goes through the motions of having the strictest divorce law in the country and actually, in fact, has the loosest divorce law in the country, and that seems to me to be a shocking scandal. It is a place for which other Americans must constantly apologize.
Charles J. Tobin, Secretary of the New York State Catholic Welfare Committee, and official spokesman for New York's Roman Catholic Diocese.
We believe that the quality of permanence is of the very essence of marriage. The purpose of marriage cannot be achieved fully without a permanent union of man and wife. At the same time, we are aware that there are those in our pluralistic society who do not agree with us. Nevertheless, we urge that your committee study the intricate problems involved and the social effects of divorce and remarriage from the standpoint of the order of society and of its common good. We urge that divorce and the license to remarry be carefully guarded and circumscribed. Realistically and frankly, we oppose changing the grounds for divorce so as to broaden them in such a way that government would, in effect, be permitting a procedure tantamount to divorce by consent.
This month, Mr. Tobin wrote a letter to all New York legislators urging delay on the divorce bill. He said it should be studied further. But there is no unanimity about divorce reform among the state's Catholics. A committee of Catholic citizens to support reform has been established, and its members include New York City Council President Frank D. O'Connor. Senator Robert F. Kennedy, whose sister Patricia recently received an Idaho divorce from actor Peter Lawford, has called New York's law archaic and unfair. Shortly after Charles Tobin's letter was released, State Senator Jerome L. Wilson, the Legislative Committee chairman, made this statement.
I said that seemingly this was a declaration of war against meaningful divorce reform in this session of the legislature. It was so negative that the law is 179 years old. And another point I made, I said that Mr. Tobin has killed divorce reform before in New York, and he cannot and must not be allowed to do it again. Richard Cardinal Cushing of Massachusetts said that Catholics, and I would say any religious group, do not need the civil law to enforce their ecclesiastical beliefs, and that sums it up to a T.
There is one step that can be taken by any court interested in the welfare of families and children, and which all parties, whether they be Catholic, Protestant, or Jew, emphatically favor. This story in a moment. There are some American communities, this city, Detroit, and others, Toledo, Los Angeles, Milwaukee, which are trying to create agencies that can stand close to the courts, but can go beyond the impersonalities of courtroom procedure to give help to families in trouble. The Detroit agency is appropriately called the Friend of the Court. Here, people who have children and are seeking a divorce must tell an investigator why they are taking this course and what provisions they plan to make for the children. They're offered expert marriage counseling that has as its purpose to repair the marriage if this is possible or advisable. If not, to help the partners and their children go through the difficult business of divorce. The counseling is voluntary. No one is compelled to accept it. Many are eager for help. Many benefit. Here is a first session.
Why did you file for separation?
Because he wants me to file for divorce. His girlfriend kept calling the house, and I would be asked to leave the room so he could talk to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I just couldn't take it anymore. And he wants me to file for divorce, and I didn't want a divorce. Our pastor said that he would give us marriage counseling, but my husband didn't want it. He says it's between him and me and no one else.
How would you account for his saying that he wanted marriage counseling today?
I don't know.
What do you make of that?
Because it looked good.
For the first time, this couple has a sympathetic but disinterested third party to whom they can express themselves. For the first time, they have a mechanism by which they can examine themselves.
Well, I feel, as it is, our marriage started out completely wrong anyway. We started out with 2 strikes against us. I'm surprised that his lasted as long as it has.
What were the 2 strikes?
Well, for one thing, we had been out together one time while we were in service, 1 week previous to our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew nothing about each other. There was no actual feeling between us. He was just...
We got married on a bet.
A bet.
Mm-hmm.
I feel it was pretty foolish to do something like that. If we had gone together for some time and knew more about each other, it may have been different and we may have still gotten married.
But he only went with his girlfriend for 2 weeks and he's willing to marry her.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you were. Yes, you did. And she said so too.
No.
Yes.
I don't agree with you.
Was there ever a time in your marriage that you did get along?
Yes.
We got along real well. We got along, I'd say, real well up until she got pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because we were going out a lot with the gang. And
we were not.
We were too. And but once she got pregnant, she changed quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
The counselor does not give orders, take sides, trot out his views. He draws out their views in a context that may well give them new and helpful insights.
How did she change when she became pregnant?
Well, our love life changed a lot, and she became a lot more, everything had to be for her.
Mm-hmm.
And
she wanted a little bit more attention than you said.
Right, and...
Were you able to give it?
Well, as best I could.
Mm-hmm.
With being in the service.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned your love life changed. How did that change?
Well, nights we were home together, she would stay away from me more. We had actually very little to do with each other as far as sexual contact had to do. She's slowly turning away from me in a way.
What do you suppose your husband means by that?
Well, he told me before I didn't give enough. I didn't give enough of myself towards him or Debbie.
But you found it easy to give of yourself before that, is that?
I don't know. I've always thought I've given enough of myself all the time. But he says I never have.
Maybe we better take a good look together as we see each other individually and kind of maybe look at three questions. Number one is, are you going to be willing to pay the price for separation? Because there is going to be a price here, isn't there? There's going to be your child, the effect it'll have on her, the effect it's going to have on each one of you as individuals, and where you're going to go from here. And is that price of divorce or separation going to be greater than the price that you're going to pay remaining married? And I think we have to take a look at what it is that you really want out of life, what direction you want to go. And you're going to have to make these decisions. We can talk about them. We can get to the point of your discussing them. I'm not going to tell you, to go back together and live as man and wife. You're going to have to decide that. Or if you don't go back, you're also going to have to decide that.
The Detroit court reports that 2/3 of the couples who complete marriage counseling decide to go back together. It seems that there are things that can be done. In many divorces, one or both partners may wind up, after the fact, seeing a psychiatrist. How many would have benefited by psychiatry before the fact? When people talk about an ideal divorce law, their main focus is on help that can be given before the fact. What would an ideal law be like? Former Judge Morris Pluskow.
I would like to have the specialized machinery attached to courts, marriage counseling, social work, probation, etc., psychiatry. Take a look at the marital situation and see if it's possible to determine whether this marriage is or is not a viable marriage, whether it's possible to patch it up so that these people can have any kind of a decent marital existence. And then if, as a result of whatever professional advice a judge can get, it's pretty clear that this is not a viable marriage, then I would make it possible to obtain a divorce with a minimum of technicality, a minimum of difficulty.
One can't eliminate family breakdown by legislating against it. My main criticism of American law of divorce would be that it isn't functional, it isn't pragmatic, it doesn't focus on the real problems that we're faced with today. The tragic side of it is that in most states, very little help is given to parties who have reached the point of divorce. No serious attempt is made to see whether the marriage could be salvaged and saved. No serious attempt is made to help the family plan for the future apart, economically, socially, legally, and every other way. In other words, there are a lot of loose ends left after divorce, and our law and our courts, by and large, are not doing anything constructive and affirmative to help.
How much do you make? I don't think you ought to pay a little more money than $30 a month to support this child, 14-year-old child.
There are 2 divorces a minute in this country. Every day the courts are in session. And in each case, one hears the tragic recounting of something that has failed.
And she's satisfied with this? She is. Okay, I'll grant the divorce. Yes, I'll mark it.
95% of these divorces are uncontested. Only one partner shows up in court. And the judge, whatever his personal feelings may be, has no alternative but to grant the divorce.
And this property settlement agreement, you read it and signed it and satisfactory to you and it's agreeable to you. All right, I'll grant you the divorce and award you custody of the child in order to pay the $75 per month as agreed upon and approve your property settlement as a judgment of the court. Thank you very much. Good luck to you.
The majority of Americans will never see the inside of a divorce court. But the dilemma over divorce clearly involves us all. It's not one, but many dilemmas. The legal dilemma, which finds otherwise law-abiding citizens driven to perjury, fabricating evidence, and fleeing their home states in search of easy divorce. The double standard dilemma, one law for the rich who can buy a divorce, one law for the poor who cannot, which makes a mockery out of a cherished concept, equal before the law. There's the special USA dilemma in divorce. 50 states, each with its own inconsistent, often antique, and sometimes downright dishonest solutions or evasions. Our society is undergoing swift and profound change. The new legal decisions involving birth control, the intense debate over abortion, subjects on which CBS News has recently reported in detail, and now divorce reflect this. All of these involve still another dilemma, church and state, the one our forefathers hoped they had licked by spelling out the separation, a line that seems as hard to draw as ever. And there is a final dilemma, the ultimate dilemma. In the United States, in which we have elevated the individual to new heights of material well-being, we seem to be going downhill in life's most important venture, marriage. We called this broadcast the divorce dilemma. It might well have been called the marriage dilemma. This is Walter Cronkite for CBS Reports. Good evening. CBS Reports, The Divorce Dilemma, was produced and edited under the supervision and control of CBS News.
Looking for something, Betty? For relief, Mrs. Rollins. Hemorrhoids again. Pain, itch. Try this. Preparation H?
Many folks tell me it temporarily relieves occasional pain and itch of hemorrhoidal tissues. Fast.
Really works? Folks swear by it. Even helps shrink swelling due to inflammation. I'll try it. Feeling better today? Thanks to you and Preparation H.
Preparation H relieves pain and itch, helps shrink swelling.
You know how important a moisturizer is to a woman's skin. It helps keep it from drying and cracking. Helps maintain its natural beauty. Now, watch how Old English furniture polish works the same way on your wood furniture. Old English's blend of 3 moisturizing ingredients helps keep the finish from drying and cracking. Helps preserve its natural beauty. It does for your furniture what your moisturizer does for your skin.
Old English, the moisturizer, helps preserve the natural beauty of your furniture. In pump spray, too.
It's a new Dial morning, and you're up and feeling new. It's a clean Dial morning, and that clean belongs to you. There's a new day dawning, and your best is going through. Starting out clean, starting out Dial, starting out new.
There's no cleaner way to start a new day than Dial soap. With deodorant protection that gets you so clean you feel your best.
Starting out clean, starting out Dial, starting out new.
Is that Steve Coughlin giving orange juice a workout?
Sure is. Orange juice takes care of my thirst every time. It isn't just for breakfast anymore.
Is that Roberta Peters about to have orange juice at a dress rehearsal?
Of course, it's refreshing, soothing, and it isn't just for breakfast anymore.
Look for 100% pure orange juice from Florida. Orange juice with a hot dog.
With anything.
Orange juice from Florida. It isn't just for breakfast anymore.
With 1 out of every 3 marriages ending in divorce, more and more Americans are finding themselves in divorce court. The judge and the lawyers are trained to handle the legal side, but all too often the parties involved are left to resolve the emotional part of the divorce as best they can. Some states have expanded their family courts to provide trained counselors that assist couples through the entire divorce process. One state currently considering such a program is Florida. But for the foreseeable future, in Florida, it's divorce traditional style.
Your marriage between you and Mac Henry, your husband, is irretrievably broken.
Right.
Is that? It is.
Right.
Do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Do you and your husband own any property together?
No, we don't.
Okay. No children. Okay, your divorce is granted, and I hope you have a a good life as a single lady. Don't get married right away again now.
Okay, thank you.
Frank Orlando is a civil court judge in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, a state where 50% of all marriages end in divorce. To Judge Orlando, that figure represents two classic problems.
It says that a lot of people get married without thinking too much about what they're doing. As I've seen over and over again, people here who have stayed together 25 years, as they say, for the sake of the children. 25 years later, they look across at each other and say, "Who are you?" And now that the kids are gone, we might as well get divorced.
Would you state your name, please?
Beatrice Santoro.
And you're the petitioner in this cause?
Yeah. Why don't they question him first?
We will. Relax.
Beatrice and Benjamin Santoro have been married for 31 years and run a motel near Fort Lauderdale. Though they live in the same house, they have barely spoken to each other since 1967. At that time, an argument over the lawn caused Mr. Santoro to seize some $50,000 in family savings. And now Mrs. Santoro is asking for alimony and possession of the motel.
Who took care of the books?
I did.
Who took care of paying the bills for the motel?
I did.
But first, Mr. Santoro's lawyer has a few questions.
Other than the money that was in the passbooks that Benny took, you had no other money of yourself?
I had some.
Well, what sum?
I would say I had about 10,000.
Did Benny know you had this 10,000 cash sitting around?
I don't think so, no.
When did there ever come a time when you divulged to him that you had that money?
Never told him.
It just came up when I found out about it, correct? Correct?
Well, I told you, my mother always told me to save a penny, not to make a man know everything you got.
Your mother
always,
told you never let a man know what you're doing, right?
Always save a penny. Yeah, right.
Did your mother ever tell you that? Don't let...
I was always a saver, and he's there to prove it.
Okay, now, did you ever receive any of the rental income from that motel, ever?
Never.
Now, you heard your wife testify in 67. You took 50,000, correct? Approximately 50,000 in bank accounts. You gave her back 15, right?
Right.
Okay. And that you knew at that time that she had some money around the house, correct? Do you know how much she had at that time?
No, I know always she had something in the house, always saving, on behind my back.
Despite his role as an impartial observer, in contested cases like these, Judge Orlando is asked to referee emotional disputes as well as the legal ones.
She bought the lot without me knowing it.
Without you knowing it?
Oh, come on.
I come home in the night and you told me.
Most of the dispute, I think, results from the anger that they have inside themselves towards the other person. And it really doesn't relate to the dispute.
He says to me, he says, listen, you pick whoever you want. You want your son. Listen,
And the system that brings them in here and has them sitting across the table from each other trying to prove to an independent arbitrator, the judge, that the other is bad, makes them just want to get more and more dirt out on the table about the other person when the real concern of the court is, well, what is fair? What is just? Let me just ask you, Mr. Santoro, do you feel your marriage is irretrievably broken?
Yes, sir.
And you want a divorce also?
Yes, sir.
How about you?
well, when you reach a certain age, you know, what are you going to do?
10 years ago, they should have seen a marriage counselor. Maybe they wouldn't be in here fighting over a piece of property, and they wouldn't have spent the last 10 years of their lives incommunicado with each other, living under the same roof. You only get one trip around, and they wasted the last 10 years with each other.
The problems experienced by the Santoros and their son might have been eased years earlier if counseling had been mandatory where they lived. Magazine went to Los Angeles, where marriage counseling is a service provided by the state's Department of Family Law. The counseling service is called Conciliation Court, and it provides licensed marriage counselors for the 5,000 couples who come here each year seeking help. Over a third of all divorces involve children. So last year, Los Angeles County improved on the state system, and now families with children must come here before their case can get to court. Sam and Sandy Mayo had spent 3 years fighting over their 2 children when they were sent to conciliation court to work out their own problems. Among them, the role of Sam's second wife, Leslie, with the children.
I feel like throughout this whole procedure that you have wanted to make Leslie, or you wanted Leslie to be as much a mother to Jennifer as possible because of the whole situation, the divorce process, the fact that you wanted custody of the kids, and you wanted to appear as a close-knit family.
I'm not aware of any, at least on my part, of any desire to preempt, you as mother. As a matter of fact, we were talking about it just last night, Leslie and I were, and I said that regardless of what my emotions have been along the lines, and I have, emotionally at times been very angry, infuriated, as you have too. But my intellect has always been in conflict with my emotions, and my intellect tells me that the children need both parents. They need lots of time and lots of love and lots of security with both parents, and the last thing I want to do is to remove that relationship that you have with the children as mother.
I'm almost frightened to go about my daily activities with Sam and the children, particularly when you are around, because I feel as though there is going to be conflict.
Once, it would have been impossible for Sandy and Leslie to even sit at the same table, but Counselor Hugh McIsaac has helped them get to know each other a little better.
Sandy and I have to get to know each other as people, because we know each other only as, mother to the children, stepmother, or, that kind of thing, and it's
How would you feel going out for lunch, just the two of you?
It'd be fine with me.
Because you do have a relationship. The three of you and all the extended family have a mission, and that is to, bring Robbie and Jenny into adulthood.
After their final counseling session, I asked the Mayos how conciliation court has helped them. Sitting here and watching you talk so comfortably through some very difficult problems, I kept wondering what it was like before.
There was tremendous hostility and very little, if any, communication. And many times we talk on the phone and end up hanging up on each other. And it got to the point where we weren't communicating at all except through our attorneys and through depositions and then through the children inadvertently. And it was just horrible. It was a terrible thing. It was filled with tension. The children would go back and forth from one home to the other, and they would come to me. I would feel almost as if, they'd been in the enemy camp, and they'd come to me and I just didn't know how to relate to them because they were involved with him, and I was so angry at him. We fought for about 3 years, and everything was settled here in about 3 months.
And we're talking about fighting between our two attorneys to the tune of about $40,000 in attorney's fees, and I don't exaggerate a bit. And then all these side fees, the experts and bringing in evaluators on the house, and her bringing in one, and my bringing in one, and then on her house and on my house, and then how much this is worth and that's worth, and the experts and the psychologists and the whole thing. It's a morass. It's an absolute morass, and once you go down that road, it's almost inescapable. You can't turn back, and conciliation court gave us that ability to turn back.
Everyone, society needs, with the number of divorces and the number of children that are coming from divorces, they need something like conciliation court to help them through this, because as Sam and Sandy both mentioned, no one wins. The conflict never would have ended, never. And yet we're beginning to make it work. And the kids are the real winners.
Through the help of Hugh McIsaac, the Mayos were able to agree on joint custody of the children, as well as child support and visitation arrangements. They drew up their own settlement, which was later recognized as a legally binding document by the court.
It's self-determination. You know, this country's founded upon that principle. And yet in one of our institutions that deals with the family, we have in the past tended to take this away. The conciliation court movement is to return that process of self-determination to the family, even though it may not exist together. We're helping them determine their own lives.
I just shudder to think what it would have been like had we not kind of been forced into this at the last minute. I don't think the kids would have had a chance in the world of having a happy life.
You think they do now?
I think they have a chance.
This is new, moist, and chunky. A dog food so delicious that one try and he may never go back to dry. See for yourself.
They're right about moist and chunky. One bite and Harold may never go back to dry.
Moist and chunky is so delicious because it puts a great meaty taste in moist chunks that are convenient and have complete nutrition.
Clarence, I know you love moist and chunky. Now, you sure you won't go back to dry?
Moist and chunky from Purina Dog Chow Dog Food. One try and he may never go back to dry. See for yourself.
Now, a word about this year's Meow Mix Meow Off from last year's winner, Tiger, the cat with the winning meow. Go get him, Tiger! Tiger?
Unfortunately, Tiger has a case of stage fright. But your cat can win a speaking role in a Meow Mix commercial, plus $15,000 and a trip to Hollywood. Look for sweepstakes details on bags and boxes in stores and magazines.
Bring down the curtain. She forgot her line.
Am I lucky? I have a normal, healthy American family. There they are. When we have a health problem, like occasional constipation, we like to do something about it. We take something gentle, X-Lax. We know it's safe. We take it just the way it says to. We learned years ago that X-Lax works gently. So when we need it, we take X-Lax. Don't you?
Dependable X-Lax, the laxative medicine.
What does it mean when a diaper gives off an ammonia smell? Good question. When you smell ammonia, it's a signal.
These expectant parents are learning that ammonia smell signals wetness. Wetness that can cause diaper irritation. What to do? Use Baby Magic Lotion before diapering. Its special cationic emollients help protect by screening out wetness. When you smell ammonia, it's telling you something. Help protect baby with Baby Magic Lotion.
Now, doesn't that feel better?
February magazine will continue.
Mr. Horn. He was ordered to capture Geronimo, but more than a legend, he was a man.
My father was a soldier. My brother was a soldier. And I've had enough of sudden death.
David Carradine, Karen Black, and Richard Widmark star in Mr. Horn, more than just another Western. Thursday at 8, 7 Central and Mountain.
Tonight on CBS. Fruit cocktail is too big an idea to cut into little pieces. That's why there's Libby's Chunky Mixed Fruits. Fresh, juicy pieces of fruit cut big and firm and chunky. So you can taste each piece of fruit one big piece at a time. Libby's Chunky Mixed Fruits. And now chunky pears and chunky peaches. Cut bigger to taste better. From 3 of the best names in the business.
The makers of Robitussin cough medicine don't think you should let just our television commercial recommend your cough medicine. The fact is, there are different kinds of coughs. That's why there are 4 different kinds of Robitussin cough medicine. When you have a cough due to colds or flu, be sure you get the right kind of medicine for your kind of cough. The makers of Robitussin ask you to ask your doctor or pharmacist.
The shake, the new yogurt shake that comes in strawberry, blueberry, and raspberry, but not so much the calorie. You can save yourself from the dairy case. Le shake.